NSA leaker Edward Snowden had some harsh words for the media in a Q&A published today in the New York Times. He explained why he went to The Guardian instead of to a major domestic newspaper, saying, quote, "After 9/11, many of the most important news outlets in America abdicated their role as a check to power, the journalistic responsibility to challenge the excesses of government, for fear of being seen as unpatriotic and punished in the market during a period of heightened nationalism. From a business perspective, this was the obvious strategy. But what benefited the institutions ended up costing the public dearly. The major outlets are still only beginning to recover from this cold period." David, does he have a point here? I do think there was a chilling effect after 9/11 on criticism of government policies, especially with relation to security.
I would agree with you. As a journalist, here's the thing, though. I get really ticked off at people who say, well, you know, journalists have pretty much laid down and stopped asking questions. I think that's BS. There's a lot of fantastic journalists who work very hard despite any pressure they get from the outside. You can make the argument there was a better way to go about it than doing what Edward Snowden did. That aside, what I find really interesting in his article is he pointed out to the New York Times there are encryption methods that journalists can use to protect sensitive information. I myself don't know much about that, and he basically pointed out in the article that he said, you know, we're in a time where you need to protect your information and your identity, and so journalists better study up on it. So I think this article is interesting not only for Americans, people around the world, but in particular for journalists. It's an interesting read.
Yeah, I mean, I respectfully disagree with you about journalists doing a decent job. I'm super critical of the way that journalists behaved after 9/11. I think if you look at the lead up to the Iraq War, with the exception of the McClatchy newspapers and maybe a few little outlets like Democracy Now!, basically the big institutional banner journalists swallowed hook, line and sinker, really didn't do their due diligence about trying to figure out whether or not there was something fishy about what the administration was saying. Maybe Snowden's going a little overboard by saying that journalists aren't doing a good job now, but I think we can justly accept some responsibility for that.
Look, it's a valid point. Can journalists do better? Absolutely. But when I run into someone who just makes a blanket statement that all journalists have laid down and stopped asking questions, you know, it's BS. Yes. Did some? Absolutely. Did some follow the company comment and just toe the line? Of course. But it doesn't stand for everybody, and you can't make a blanket statement across all journalists. There are some fantastic people out there. And the great thing about the internet, HuffPost Live and similar things, is suddenly people who truly want to ask those tough questions can do so. You don't have to work for a New York Times or a McClatchy. You can have your own webcam, you can have your own website, and you can do some damn good reporting on your own.